Good afternoon from Helsinki. I'm back at Odie Library today in Workstation D. I think I did another video from the same spot. It's been a very evanescent day. It's you look out one side and it looks like it's all sunny and bright and lovely, and you look out the other way and there's dark clouds coming, and then it changes minute to minute. It's very mixed and mercurial today, but it's what passes for warmth, at least this summer. A few days ago it was like 16 degrees, and now I think we're back up to like mid 20s. But I've been wanting to do Sunday Morning, which many people say is the most lush, gorgeous poem ever written in the English language. I I didn't believe that for many years. I still think Wallace Stevens wrote some others, The Roars of Autumn and The Man with the Blue Guitar, that have just the play of ideas and the lightning gets me more. But I really came to appreciate this one when I was sitting in the backyard of a really, really, you could only describe this house as stately and seeped in history and just gorgeous, loaded with antiques. But the backyard had this like private aspect to it, despite it being in the middle of a large old city. And I don't know when this was. This would have been maybe 2008, 2009. And I was like, this is the setting for a Sunday morning, because you have the lush vegetation, you have palm trees, you have manicured gardens. It was kind of like a private garden type thing. And I recently found out that they've sold that house. I was hoping sometime in the future maybe I'd get to visit there again, but that will never happen. And it was also, and I remembered that the other person who impressed upon me that this was an incredibly gorgeous poem was Bill Cook. Bill Cook was the long time, I think he was a long time, at least when I was there, he was chair of the English department at the college I went to in New Hampshire, Dartmouth College. And he was always doing like side projects and seminars and public lectures, and he wrote poetry, published poetry and other books. And I was like, there was one thing he did where he paired this with there's a Dartmouth author called Norman MacLean who wrote a gorgeous brief, I guess you'd call it novella, maybe it was more than a novella, but A River Runs Through It, which they made into a movie with Brad Pitt fly fishing in Montana, coming of age, the brief enigmatic life we live compared to the sweep of history, and how we can never really reach people we actually love. We think we can do better than we can. Those types of themes. And it was funny because they were bringing it together with Dr. Seuss. Norman MacLean and Dr. Seuss overlapped in their time at Dartmouth. We're talking like in the 20s, like 1920. One was class of 24, one was class of 25, and they both wrote for the humor magazine, Jack-O-Lantern. And so they were fun. They were quite good friends. I think they stayed in touch. And Norman MacLean said of Dr. Seuss that he was the craziest guy I ever met. Apparently, he said that many, 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 many years later. They had kept in touch, I think, through most of their adult lives. But anyway, it reminded me the way he paired that tautly written elegiac book to, of course, with its allusions to Wordsworth, and then he took it into the 20th century because Wallace Stevens wrote Sunday Morning in the 1910s, I think somewhere between you can Google it, but it was kind of in that at least they weren't really contemporaries. Wallace Stevens was much older, but he linked it beautifully with the Wordsworth to the river runs through it to Sunday morning, and he argued for the rhetorical devices and the lush imagery and the unforgettable phrasing of Sunday morning. So I'm going to keep rambling on here. I don't know when I'm going to start in on the poem, but it might be a few more minutes. So you might want to look ahead to, like, I don't know, the 10-minute mark, and then you could go back if you're so inclined. But I've been wanting to do this one for a long time, but I wanted to do it right. I did Man with the Blue Guitar in one take, but that poem I used to have fully memorized, and I did other readings and discussions of it over the last 40 years. No, not quite 40 years. I just turned 50 this week, so I have a different concept of time now. And so we talk about where Norman MacLean in A River Runs Through It brings up, and I can still hear Bill Cook, who was very, very, he was always speaking from the center. He very rarely said anything that he didn't mean, I don't think. And he reminded me of Robert Bly, and I pointed that out to him in an email once, because they both wore vests that no one else would wear in wild patterns and colors. And they both had they were both poets too. And he replied back to me, he said, Robert Bly never in his life looked as chic as I. So that's a little bit of the character of Bill Cook. But before he read Sunday morning, he talked a little bit about the Norman MacLean, the river runs through it, and that, of course, that the ending of it is well known about the things merging into one, and the river was cut by the world's great flood, and over rocks that form the basement of time. On some of the rocks are timeless raindrops. Under the rocks are the words, and some of the words are theirs. I'm haunted by waters. But earlier in the book, he talks about, the family tradition of fly fishing and how that's related to poetry, and Wordsworth's lovely mention of spots of time in the prelude. And he says, obviously alluding to Wordsworth, and you wonder about these names that come from, like, I'm kind of fascinated also these days by alternative histories, and like if historical figures were actually real people or not. Like how could one of the greatest poets of the English language have the name Wordsworth? Just a coincidence. Anyway, so MacLean says, poets talk about spots of time, but it is really fishermen who experience eternity compressed into a moment. No one knows what a spot of time is until the whole world is a fish, and then that fish is gone. I shall remember that son of a bitch forever. And so it's kind of a nice, more prosaic, and at least in terms of like Wallace Stevens Wordsworth, a little bit crass in the context of an elegiac, lovely novel where there's hardly a word misplaced. And that reminds me of what Wordsworth's contemporary Coleridge said about poetry, is that it's the best words linking, connecting with the next best words. And whereas he thought that good writing, like good reportage or novels, was just like good words in a decent order, but poetry was just a little bit extra. Like you had to have the word, and then it had to link to the next one and the next one, and then you have, the musicality, da 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 da. And so So that's really what Wallace Stevens. I don't think Wallace Stevens could have imagined that he could have written something so beautiful when he set out on his. This was before his morning walk. This is actually a fairly early poem in his career. But he says, and that's the other thing. That's like Emily Dickinson said. Well, I know it's poetry if it rips the top of my head straight off. That's paraphrasing. She said it better, I'm sure. But it's true. But it's true. It's like you can hear someone. You can go into the wrong room and hear somebody who's passionate about a great poem reading it. You don't even have to understand. It could be in a different language, or it could be something that like you weren't planning to listen to, but then it catches you, and you know it's poetry, and you don't know exactly what it means, and that's why people like Robert Bly and others said that there's a long tradition of if it's good enough, you got to read it twice. But I'm only going to do Sunday morning once. I'm going to try to. I'm in this glorious room. I was evoking this lovely, genteel southern scene with a lush garden, and here I am in this workspace. But the thing about poetry is, if it's good enough, it's just the words, the spaces between the words, and the mood, the garden, the little walled-in space that it creates, right? So Stephen says in Sunday morning, complacencies of the peignoir, and late coffee and oranges in a sunny chair, and the green freedom of a cockatoo upon a rug mingled to dissipate the holy hush of ancient sacrifice. She dreams a little, and she feels the dark encroachment of that old catastrophe as a calm darkens among water lights. The pungent oranges and bright green wings seem things in some procession of the dead, winding across wide water without sound. The day is like wide water without sound, stilled for the passing of her dreaming feet over the seas to silent Palestine, dominion of the blood and sepulchre. Why should she give her bounty to the dead? What is divinity if it can come only in silent shadows and in dreams? Shall she not find in comforts of the sun, in pungent fruit and bright green wings, or else in any balm or beauty of the earth, things to be cherished like the thought of heaven? Divinity must live within herself. Passions of rain or moods in falling snow, grievings and loneliness or unsubdued elations when the forest blooms, gusty emotions on wet roads on autumn nights, all pleasures and all pains, remembering the bow of summer and the winter branch. These are the measures destined for her soul. Jove in the clouds had his inhuman birth. No mother suckled him, no sweet land gave large mannered motions to his middy mind. He moved among us as a muttering king, magnificent would move among his hinds, until our blood commingling, virginal, with heaven brought such requital to desire. The very hinds discerned it in a star. Shall our blood fail? Or shall it come to be the blood of paradise? And shall the earth seem all of paradise that we shall know? The sky will be much friendlier than now, a part of labor and a part of pain, and next in glory to enduring love, not this dividing and indifferent blue. She says, but in contentment, with wakened birds before they fly, test the reality of misty fields by their sweet questionings. But when the birds are gone and their warm fields return no more, where then is paradise? There is not any haunt of prophecy, nor any old chimera of the grave, neither golden underground, nor isle melodious where spirits get them home, nor visionary south, nor cloudy palm remote on heaven's hill, that has endured as April's green endures, or will endure, like her remembrance of awakened birds, or her desire for June and evening tipped by the consummation of the swallow's wings. She says, "But in contentment, I still feel the need of some imperishable bliss. Death is the mother of beauty. Hence from her alone shall come fulfillment in our dreams and our desires. Although she strews the leaves of sure obliteration on our paths, the path sick sorrow took, the many paths where triumph rang its brassy phrase, or love whispered a little out of tenderness. She makes the willow shiver in the sun for maidens who were wont to sit and gaze upon the grass relinquished to their feet. She causes boys to pile new plums and pears on disregarded plate, the maidens taste, and stray impassioned in the littering leaves. Is there no change of death in paradise? Does ripe fruit never fall? Or do the boughs hang always heavy in that perfect sky, unchanging, yet so like our perishing earth, with rivers like our own that seek for seas they never find, the same receding shores that never touch with inarticulate pang? Why set the pair upon those river banks, or spice the shores with odors of the plum? Alas, that they should wear our clothes there, the silken weavings of our afternoons, and pick the strings of our insipid lutes. Death is the mother of beauty, mystical, within whose burning bosom we devise our earthly mothers waiting sleeplessly. Supple and turbulent, a ring of men shall chant in orgy on a summer morn, their boisterous devotion to the sun, not as a god, but as a god might be. Naked among them like a savage source, their chant shall be a chant of paradise, out of their blood returning to the sky, and in their chant shall enter voice by voice the windy lake wherein their Lord delights. The trees like seraphim and echoing hills that choir among themselves long afterward, they shall know well the heavenly fellowship of men that perish and of summer morn, and whence they came and whither they shall go, the dew upon their feet shall manifest. She hears, upon that water without sound, a voice that cries, the tomb in Palestine is not the porch of spirits lingering. It is the grave of Jesus where he lay. We live in an old chaos of the sun, or old dependency of day and night, or island solitude, unsponsored, free of that wide water inescapable. Deer walk upon our mountains, and the quail whistle about us their spontaneous cries. Sweet berries ripen in the wilderness and in the isolation of the sky at evening. Casual flocks of pigeons make ambiguous undulations as they sink downward to darkness on extended wings. So that's one where you feel that you're both deeply connected to the best and darkest feelings of this world, and then you're also a little bit up in the clouds. You're also a bit detached because the wording is so gorgeous, and there's not a misplaced word. I feel a lot of the same in certain parts. I feel some of the same energy and music as in The Man with the Blue Guitar, but this is more lush and has, well, I don't know if I would agree with that. That it has more phrases that instantly stick in your mind and images, and that you can read this 100 times and get something new out of it the 101st time, etc. But this and I also wanted to say is like the other thing that connected me with it was I did a short video of, actually I think I was in this very room when I did it, of Robert Bly's poem of descending into the ashes, that we almost do in our life. um, and that, the ascent is beautiful. That's everything, pop culture, corporate culture tells you. It's just always new, building, 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 um, chasing all these plastic dreams. But he, and I'm sure Bly loved Stevens. He liked to make fun of him, but I think some of that came out of envy of just being able to write with such music. And so he I think probably unconsciously lifted that line, or that same feeling from the end of this poem, as when he says in his ghazal, it's like growing your wings on the way down. That's okay to grow your wings on the way down. And that was a metaphor that he could carry into so many different discussions about life and grief, and finding your own robust core in life. I mean, that's that almost sounds corporate, but as Stephen says, he starts in this kind of like idyllic scene that almost it's like a movie set, right? It's all or it's just glamour. It's glamour. It's definitely bourgeois, not necessarily ultra wealth, but there's some wealth and tradition behind it when the poem starts out. But then he goes into a lot of darkness too, and then he's like, and then nature. So it's an interesting tension between culture, class, nature, fleeting moments, evanescence. As I was saying, now the sun just peaked again. It's going to be gone in another couple seconds. But he says, and in the isolation of the sky at evening, casual flocks of pigeons make ambiguous undulations as they sink downward to darkness on extended wings. So it's like I almost feel like he's taken us on such a journey deep in the soul, but there's such beauty in the words and in the scenes that he conjures up, that if you read it quickly, or if you're not familiar with it, if you haven't really studied it, and then there's of course the religion too, like the formal religion or religious ideas, but just its surface is just so beautiful. It's like if you don't even you're not trying to overanalyze it or keep asking yourself, what does this mean? What does this mean? It's just the gorgeous surface of these words. And then as you get into them, it's like, at first you're like, oh my God, like he's talking about some dark, deep things. I don't know if I want to think about that today, but it's so seductive. It's like the sirens, right? It's and just the way that they're just these little bits of glitter that are popped in there, alongside the harsh truths. We live in an old chaos of the sun. I often repeat that to myself when I'm walking along. I love that line. He's like, his death is the mother of beauty is the one probably most known from here. But I like that idea. And then how there's some doubt in there. It's like, we live in an old chaos of the sun, which sounds like it's like a powerful, definitive statement. We live in an old chaos of the sun, oral dependency of day and night, or island solitude, unsponsored, free of that wide water, inescapable. Deer walk, where did the deer come in? Deer walk upon our mountains, and the quail whistle about us their spontaneous cries. Sweet berries ripen in the wilderness, and in the isolation of the sky. At evening, casual flocks of pigeons make ambiguous undulations downward to darkness on extended wings. And I think with that, I'm going to end this I wanted to do this one. I thought that was pretty good, but I may do this one again, um, and replace this one. But for now, this is what we're going with. Thanks, and if I can encourage one person to read poetry like Sunday morning out loud, it will change your life in ways you can't even imagine. The way that um, these, it reminds me of the psychologist Robert Moore, who was a Jungian psychologist in Chicago. He said, and you could tell, like, he had lived through a lot of tragedy, and you could tell he had a personal journey where Jung very directly helped him, and then he went deep, deep, deep into that thought and helped unlock some of those ideas for other people, and he was able to communicate them in a very down to earth way. But he said, at a certain point of his life, he just realized, you know, just study the great minds, and so for him, that was like Paul Tillich, Carl Jung. He read a lot of poetry, and then some other of the great interpreters of Jung. And he said, it's not that small minds aren't great, or precious, but he says, I only have so much time, and I know that that I have enough material to last me the rest of my life if I get deep into Jung and Tillich. So anyway, I could go on forever. I try to avoid most of the kind of like scholarly stuff about this poem. Tried to focus on just the sound and some memories, because great poetry will stir up memories and then connections between other works of art, people you once knew, time and place, and then when that links up to the greater themes, what's not to love. Anyway, have a great day.